All right. Well, welcome everyone to the Egg Harbor Libraries Book Club. Today we're talking about Ask Again, Yes by Mary Beth Keane, which happened to be the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon's book. I didn't even know they had a book. And so they read this book and they were discussing it on, is it the, I don't know those shows. They're too late for me, so I never watched them. But if they have a clip on, I'll watch maybe the next day. But they were discussing Ask Again, Yes, and Jimmy Fallon said it was a lot. It reminded him of growing up in New York, and yeah, it was an interesting book. What do you all think about it? Like, dislike? Anyone strong feelings about it? Nancy, what do you think?
I wanted to know where the joy was. These people were all committed to these marriages, and I didn't see any joy in their life. And so I kept asking myself, why are they staying with each other if there's no joy? So that was my overall thought.
Well, I don't know. I thought Francis and Lena had joy in the beginning of their marriage. Probably after the accident, she became his caretaker and not a wife. But then I think they found joy later at the end of the book. I don't know. That's my opinion. Anyone else?
I did not get a chance to read it. I thought we were on Know My Name.
Oh, good. You've read that one because I have to talk to you. Hey, Linda, you're muted.
Yeah, I unmuted myself, and I was going to say, I thought this book was really hard for me to read because that could have been the story of my growing up. My mom was that person in that time frame.
Which person?
Anne, the bipolar, manic depressive, whatever you want to call her.
Yeah, my mom too. She's
and
heavily medicated to this day. Yeah.
Well, I don't see my mom, so I don't know. I really like M. Peter. But I mean, when Nancy was asking about where's the joy, I mean, it's sort of like that was true. I mean, there isn't any joy. I mean, his life, I mean, you're trying to take care of her and trying to see the symptoms before your father, will admit that something's going wrong again. I mean, she did a good job of portraying a child growing up in that kind of
dysfunctional family.
Yeah, dysfunctional. Totally.
Yeah, because the father became an alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
And
what father became an alcoholic?
Peter.
Okay. I think it's important.
Brian was an alcoholic.
I think there are many characters here that are in pain and are suffering, and I think it's really important that you identify who you're talking about, because I think there are different messages coming from different. The men are different, and the way they handle it are different.
And but what's sad about Anne is when you look back at what happened to her when she was growing up, and then she loses a baby, and how in this day and age, everybody, you would be seeking help. In that time frame, they didn't seek help. And I think that's why a lot of women, people thought they were hysterical or they were this or they were that because of what had transpired that they couldn't talk about. You didn't talk about somebody, sexually assaulting you. You didn't talk about losing a baby, and people weren't very caring about those things. It was like, well, just brush it up. I think it can affect people different ways. And I think for Anne, it was, those things just had an impact along. And then I think that's part of, we have to look at all of her instead of just that portion where she was over medicating and then decided to go off the rails.
But didn't she have a predisposition to mental illness because her mother committed suicide? And you know, again, science wasn't aware of what could be done to help people, but I don't know that the loss of the child was, well, it was different for her than it would be for anybody. Everybody's unique in the way they handle that. But I think there's just that predisposition to mental illness that science wasn't even aware of that hereditary issue at that time.
Yeah, and I think this is the story of mental illness over 40 years. Like,
Yeah.
how it has changed and how we accept alcoholism. Or I didn't know when I was growing up that even existed. And so, you know, just the whole, it's open and we're talking about it more and accepting people more. And back when alcoholics were considered just, you know, you drink too much. And then by the end of the story, it's a disease, you know, that she needs to help them get over this disease. But I think, yeah, it's just the story of not only mental illness, alcoholism, but how people have changed over 40 years and just many things. So
I think the character that I think was really the most inspiring was Francis, because he actually was a pretty nice man. I mean, even though he had this disability, he was always kind and always basically this nice, and he just evolved into this. I was amazed because he didn't seem to have any ill will towards any of these people, which I think if I would have had half my face blown off, I might have been a little bit PO'd, you know?
Well, you know, in looking at it in relation to Janine's comment about it's over 40 years, it's about alcoholism, it's about dysfunction over 40 years. And I think the title really plays into that. Yes, ask again. Or ask again, yes. I don't know which way it goes. Ask again, yes. I think that really plays into it because I think in the end, they all ask again and they all say yes to each other in their own ways. I think the title's really significant. I think the title gives redemption. And about joy, Nancy, I'm not sure everyone has joy in life. And I think this was a very realistic portrayal of life. And if you read reviews and listen to what she says about it, Keane says about it, that was her goal.
Well,
I think she achieved it.
and I think they were all happy in their own way. You know, Lena just wanted a house to take care of and her kids and the little house. Well, no, she didn't want to have the little house and but just because they didn't have joy didn't mean they weren't happy in their own ways.
I agree, because there's not always joy in everyone's life. And that's why I think the title is really significant. Because in the end, they all find ways to accept the situation they're in. And yes, Francis was a remarkable person. He leads the charge in acceptance. But I think this book's a lot about transition.
I think this book is a lot about forgiveness. I mean, there was so much forgiveness. Practically every character in one way or another had to forgive, and you know, and they all did it so beautifully too in the end. I think you know,
I agree.
Just amazing, awesome what they were able to do.
I gotta say, George was a pretty cool character. He really came up, you know, he took care of Peter and he stopped drinking, and then he had, at the end, he had his girlfriend, or his, I don't know if they were married, I don't know that, but he just became this really cool guy, you know? He stepped up to the plate and really liked him as a character. I really did.
I did too.
I did too. What was his name again? I forgot.
George.
Yeah.
It's interesting. In a review I read this morning in which they asked Keane about her characters, if she stays attached to him. George, Marcia, is one she mentions. she says she stays attached to all her characters, that they're part of her. But she said that, I can't remember, I read like 4 or 5 reviews really quickly this morning, but she says in one that George is one that really stays with her, that she was standing in line in a grocery store and looked over at this guy and was like, yeah, that's what George would wear.
Yeah, didn't we all have an image of him somehow?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a character, but
Yeah.
what a nice man. I mean, what, to take Peter in and really try hard, and, you know, he was,
He had a lot of joy throughout his life.
yes.
Because, for an alcoholic to finally seek like help, they have to lose something big. And he lost his wife. She left him. And he turned around and he tried to warn Peter, you've got that gene. And but he was able to, that happened to him. He was able to he found a lot of joy. He found joy in Peter. And Peter was a depressed character throughout the whole book. I never really liked Peter at all. I never felt any kind of connection to Peter. Never Kate. Probably the only person I kind of liked, Anne.
Oh.
But
Janine, I have a question. How could you, when you say you don't like Peter, when Peter was so doggedly determined, and yes, he had George's inspiration, but how could you not like this kid that just kept doing everything by the way it should be done? Went to visit.
It wasn't like I didn't like him. I just was like, maybe I wanted him to be more like, wake up, you've got PTSD, you've got some problems here. And it's not that I don't know.
I think that's the time frame, though. I mean, maybe as he got older and he finally started going to, rehab, woke up and actually accepted he needed to go to rehab. But I mean, to say PTSD when you were, what would he would have, the 80s when he was maybe going to school? I'm not sure about the time frame now, but it just doesn't seem like that would be something that, again, would be discussed. I mean, it was just.
Do you think if you said to a 15 or 16-year-old kid right now you have PTSD, they'd know? Do you think that a 15 or 16-year-old
I bet they would.
knows what PTSD is? I'm unaware. I don't have exposure to children that age, but I think that's a pretty heavy responsibility. I think that Peter was just, I thought he was incredible. I thought he was just, he does everything he should. He gets good grades. He gets in college. He lives with his Uncle George. He doesn't put George out at all. Remember, he sleeps on the couch.
Yeah.
And, they're just, and he goes to see his mother. How frustrating must that have been?
Yeah.
Incredibly deflating that much.
All right. I like Peter.
I'm sorry. I just think that I'm not sorry.
To refresh my memory, Teresa. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll be quiet.
I don't know. I just felt so bad for Anne. It's just like she was from the beginning. And this whole thing with the Irish, that this was a story about the Irish too, the Irish that came over and are in New York. And they are the policemen and the firemen in Boston and New York. And so that the whole Irish thing too was interesting. I don't know. The whole thing.
I thought Peter and his mother, they reminded me of the characters in the stationery shop, the book we read last month.
Yeah.
I thought, wow, Peter's just as sweet as the guy, and I can't think of his name there. And the mother had similar problems that were brought on from similar experiences. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, it is. It was very similar.
A mentally ill mother raising her son and the consequences on his son, because that really was 2 books in a row.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not planned.
Oh, okay. I thought it was very strategic.
Now, it does sound like it was a very depressing book, not necessarily, or
Oh, I
don't
didn't think
think
it
so.
was at all.
I don't think it's depressing.
No, I think, the whole, like I said, I thought the forgiveness thing was a big part of the theme, and it really ended up with everybody, like, kind of, they'd found their place, they were content, they were getting along, things had been strengthened. So I thought it was really, really good.
Well, at the end of the book, who says it? I think we all are, it was the last sentence or something, or in the last paragraph, where they said that, I don't remember, was it Lena or
It's
was it Kate?
Francis saying that they were all fine.
That we're all fine.
Yeah.
We're lucky. He said, we are all lucky. And I'm thinking, oh, if you think this is lucky, but to come out of that and think you're lucky is unbelievably shows the power, as you say, of forgiveness and the strength of the human spirit.
Yeah.
That, to me, was such an important statement for the whole. I mean, it really put the whole thing, tied the bow on the ribbon of the package. She did it so well on that. Just that one sentence was amazing to me, because as you think over your life, you're thinking, well, wow, if that's lucky, I must really be in heaven, because I don't have any of these wacky things happening to me,
Yeah.
Marcia, the line you're looking for is, it comes from Lena, and
Lena, that's what I thought.
and she says, I think we've been luckier than most people.
Yeah.
At least I think that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, that's the
And
sentence.
I copied it.
Francis says yes, he said yes. So, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I think that goes back to the title.
Mhm.
Yes,
Yeah. A good
and I agree that it's about forgiveness, but it's about just acceptance, and that life is. I didn't think it was depressing. I mean, it wasn't the most uplifting story when they're talking about getting their face blown off, or the first time Francis and the other father, what's that guy's name?
Brian.
Brian, the first time they walk in a bodega and they see someone killed. But the thing is that it was just very, I don't know. When I finished it, I was like, I wanted to know who Marianne Keane was, where she came from, what the deal was with her. And she's been listed as, there's evidently some award. There's so many awards these days, but she's one of 5 under 35.
Right.
Yeah, right.
And she's gotten all kinds of awards. So.
Let's talk a little bit about Brian. Okay, so Brian was Peter's father, and in the beginning of the book, you feel like sorry for Brian, and then you feel mad at Brian, and then it was this whole thing, and then at the end, I just disliked Brian. He was he left Anne and left his son. Worst, he left his son. And no. Yeah, he could have gone and played golf, but could he have communicated, and then there was at the end, getting that package with the pictures. And so then there was that redemption, forgiveness there. So Brian was an interesting character. Anyone have any thoughts on Brian? Besides,
I got the impression that they kept coming back to, she knows where the gun is, and he walks away.
yeah.
I took that as he obviously thought she would kill herself. I mean,
So too. Yeah.
wow. I mean, you can't get your wife help. You
With
would
your son in the house, and you leave
Yeah.
a gun.
So
Nancy?
I think Brian was a coward. And as you pointed out, he walked away knowing she had the gun. I think she was hoping that she'd take care of the problem. Then he was such a coward that he just walked away from his son. He walked away from anything in his life. I'm one of these people that does find joy in playing golf. So, it was one of his ways of coping was to just take off and do something else. But he was definitely a coward. And even by the fact that here he had a live-in girlfriend for all these years who took care of him with his diabetes, and then he doesn't leave her a thing because he was a coward and he didn't want to tell her that he had a family that he never divorced and what was going on. So
and he was ashamed too. That's why he never mentioned it. He knew he was wrong. He was ashamed.
Yeah.
And he walked away when they had the birth of the first child that was dead. I mean, he was not supportive there either and would not even acknowledge or, deal with it. So, yeah,
I
he
think
had a problem.
I mean, unfortunately, I feel like that's a type of man that, it's like toxic masculinity, sort of. Like they just don't want to deal with stuff and they just kind of, it was just a role. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the significance of the 3 photographs that he sends back, that he kept in his hat when he was a cop, that he kept so close to him and that he would keep it. I mean, I agree with everything you've said, but we're talking about, we've thrown out words forgiveness and redemption. We got to send some his way.
I think so. I really don't think the man, he carried these around, but I don't know. I just thought that, he could have done, yes, he left them his house but I just don't think that.
Okay, being the devil's advocate for a minute, was he not as much a victim at the time as we've allowed Anne to be, we've allowed Peter to be, because we didn't talk about those things.
Yeah, but he didn't seek any help. Everybody else did. He didn't. He was still an alcoholic and he had diabetes and he had his, and he was, so he didn't even, it wasn't like he was trying to help himself in any way, shape or form.
But
everybody else helped.
But don't you think he's an example of people that are really out there? And this book was, an example of people that are really out there. And he was the one person that falls through the cracks and doesn't make it. He wasn't luckier than most. Not everybody is. And I think that was another thing that the author was trying to talk about. I think the author drew us in really well and wrote really well, but she talked about things that were hard.
Yeah. That whole Food King episode.
Oh, that was terrible.
Oh my God. Yeah. And
what was that?
In Food King, she was in the this is when she had her breakdown. And and she probably should have stayed in the hospital. How she left was I'm like, whoa, that would never happen,
No.
She could leave like that. But the whole breakdown at the grocery store and was heart-wrenching. Yeah, she needed help and she didn't really get the help.
No.
And I think it's also the story of medication, when you have an illness like that, it's just like there's not a quick fix. It takes a long time, and nowadays someone would be you're in the hospital for a while till they figure it out. And how she got out, and Brian should have brought her right back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and he didn't.
No.
Because he was embarrassed.
Right.
We don't talk about those things, in front of the kids. Yeah. And I think people are more open now with talking things out with the kids too. Yeah.
The adults were sheltering the kids instead of actually taking care of the problem, especially with the Food King issue. That should have been the straw that broke the camel's back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it didn't. It was just slid, and that's, if she had gotten help, she wouldn't have shot Francis. But yeah, and to have the gun, I mean, that's such a having a gun in the house. I mean, I just thought, whoa, you know.
They're cops. What did you expect?
I know, but you hide it, you lock it. There's ways of just to put it in a cabinet is not.
Yeah, it wasn't secured very well, but it was also put it back in its time.
Yeah.
He had a gun lock and he didn't use it. So
Yeah.
is he going back to the fact he hopes she uses it? I don't know. But he had a gun lock. He could have properly secured it. Lots of people have firearms, but they're properly secured. And the ammunition isn't anywhere near where the actual gun is. So you can properly secure a lethal weapon without it causing all the trauma that it did.
And for Francis to help him buy that, I mean, that's what kind of character Francis was. He took him to the store. We're going to get you a lock. We're going to make sure this doesn't happen again. And that's what Francis, and in the end, Francis doing all that to help is the one that gets shot. I mean, it's just. I don't know.
Early on in the book, when Francis is talking about when he comes, when he comes back and he works in his uncle's bar and his uncle talks to him about being a policeman, his uncle the uncle that owns the bar says to him, well, take the job, get the job, because in 20 years, you work 20 years and you'll have your pension. And Francis is like 20 years old when he says that to him. And Francis thinks, oh, wow, 20 years, that's a long time. But Francis has this thought. He says he begins to think of his life in 20-year blocks. And that's kind of interesting, I think, because Francis is a good guy throughout the whole thing, but he gets better in each block.
And I wonder, she used titles to break up the story. And she did Billum is the first one. And then I know she had Muster at the end. What were the other ones? Oh, Queens.
And 2 by 2.
2 by 2. So you're right. In the 40 years, it was Francis. Good going, Trissa. It was Francis.
Don't give me all the credit. I read, I told you I read five reviews this morning.
But I knew there was more to, what does 2 by 2? I was like, okay, I know Muster, but what was?
Well, the couples finally get back together, 2 by 2.
Exactly.
All right.
Because Kate and, and Peter resolve, the couples resolve their issues, I believe.
Yeah.
And I stab at it though. I think that's what they mean.
Yeah. And I know, and I just listened to the Jimmy Fallon interview, but Mary Beth Keane stressed that it was a Romeo Juliet story, and that the parent, you had to deal with the problems. It didn't end, but continued, and the parents and the families had to all deal with it. And that was, I went, oh yeah, it's a Romeo and Juliet story, but yeah, kid love, yeah. I liked it after I read half of it and listened to half of it, and I don't recommend listening to it. The narrator, anyone else listen to it? No. Narrator's voice was kind of blasé. It wasn't a good read out loud. So it was best read, by book.
That was going to be my question. I've got a 6-hour drive tomorrow. Should I listen to it? But maybe not then.
Well, I think you should if you can get it and listen to it, because now you've heard the discussion, and
yeah, probably
you can fill in the blanks. I think it would be good.
Okay.
Yeah. I had to go back and pick up the book at the end after I read the first half and then listened to the second half so I can work in my house. So something about audiobooks, and you can actually do something else too
Yeah.
when you don't have time.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
yeah, but yeah, so I'm glad at first when it took me a long time to pick it up because of the topic. And I'm like,
I was prone not to like it because of the cover.
and the cover.
Yeah, the
I
cover.
think book covers
What is the
play
cover?
a large a part in intriguing it. I thought it was just kind of boring.
It
Yeah,
doesn't
that-
tell you anything.
That was
reminded
that's a
me-
bad cover.
Yeah,
It looked
I
like
thought-
Little Fires Everywhere, that cover. That was kind of like set in I guess the suburbia component to the cover.
Because it's from
Think
it's
about it.
it's
Gillen?
yeah, if you look closer, I just thought it was blues and greens, but if you, and I don't have a light on, but it is an aerial view of Gillum probably. I didn't
Really? I'll
yeah.
have to look at it again because I thought it was
Look
really.
I did not I just thought it was blues and greens and
Yeah, that's what I
Me
thought.
too.
well, no, it's an aerial view.
Oh,
It appealed to me because I liked Little Fires Everywhere, and I thought it looked like the same kind of cover. Just
Cover.
You're
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. So this has been bought for a series,
Oh,
Oh,
Little Fires
Ooh.
Everywhere, which they did.
oh yeah,
So it's been purchased. It will be interesting because I thought they did a fantastic job with Little Fires Everywhere. I don't know if anyone else has that same opinion. But yeah, I wonder, this would make a good series, I think.
I think so.
yeah.
There's lots of stories within a story. Yeah. I also think it's a story of also the Catholics too. I mean, I was raised Catholic, but I remember a friend's mother being very sick, and they were saying, too bad she was thinking she must have done something wrong because of her Catholic religion. That's why she felt like that. And I think the whole Catholic religion in this book too, going to St. Bart's, and that played a role in the book. I don't know, but in that they were together and maybe forgiveness because of their religion. I don't know if I just remember that friend saying her mother felt she was sick because she did something wrong in her religion. But
that's nasty.
I know.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're walking a fine line there.
Yeah.
I think that Carol's comment about reminding us of the stationery shop and the similarities between the mother-son there and the mother-son here is a good point.
Yeah.
I recently listened to an author named Laura Books. She's Australian, and she wrote The Afterworld. And it's about a pandemic. It's about a pandemic. What happens afterwards? And she has transgender people in it. And one of the things she first upset at the start of this was, I need to let you know that I apologize to transgender people. I got it wrong. I just am struck with that. The tolerance is so important right now, and how you say things is so important right now. We really are becoming very conscious of not crossing lines and being accepting. And I think that's really important. And I just think this is a fine line to say Catholicism caused this woman to be this way.
No, I'm not saying Catholicism caused it, but it's the way they treated forgiveness and yeah, I just I know
In the culture of the
culture.
stationery shop, they didn't treat mental illness any better than they treated it in this book.
No, and what I meant by that her religion was so important that this is why my life is the way it is. and this is what God gave me. That's what she meant by that. And I think these people had such strong conviction about their religion throughout the story. And in the end, it pays off because they understand forgiveness. I don't know.
Or
Maybe
were you talking about Lena getting cancer because she was stressed out? Or I guess I didn't really, I didn't really see the religion a ton, just at the end. But Irish Catholic, you know, you could assume for sure.
And this is this family, when she said that statement, I always just was like, no, it's not because of our religion. It's not because we've been given this. And I don't know if they had, I don't know. I just throw that out there. But yeah, they were Catholic, they were Irish, and this family was Irish Catholic that was talking about this. And yeah, and the daughter was like, I wish my mother wouldn't have thought that way. That was her whole thing. Like, could she have just, you're just sick. It's not because you did something.
Well, I think sometimes that is an old feeling, you're saying 40, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
That, people did think that sometimes, that you had done something wrong, and maybe that's why you're ill, which is nasty too.
Yeah, I know.
I think what was interesting though, like Francis came over from Ireland and you never hear about his family. I mean, you didn't hear anything that they wrote or called, you know what I mean? There was no connection after he came here, and all these people just totally, there was no connection back to Ireland on any of these people, which was strange to me. You would think that you would have some.
Why, Marsha? Anne, didn't look back to Ireland. And when Anne and Francis would talk, they never talked about Ireland together. But they're both, first generation immigrants.
They did talk together at the end then. Remember when they both kind of got trapped in the house unexpectedly? While Brian was being taken to the rehab center, they both had conversation. And by the time I can't think of her name now. By the time she came home, there they were chatting about memories from Ireland.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting, kind of surprising.
And I think, no one could really talk to Anne in the beginning anyway. She was very elusive and not wanting to chat anyway. So I don't think that he had even an opportunity to chat with her.
Yeah, she kept to herself. I mean, even when Lena tried to give her the baby piece of equipment, and she was just really not open to anyone.
But Francis admitted that he didn't want anything to do with her, that he knew that she was bad. He just couldn't figure out why she was off. I know bad's not the right word, but why she was off. And he admitted he just ignored it and told his wife to stay away from her. And he probably shouldn't have been ignoring the whole situation from the very beginning. He admitted that.
Yeah.
One of the things that I found really interesting was when Francis was like, no, that kid's trouble. Don't go there. Don't marry Peter. He's trouble. It kind of reminded me of relationships that I've been in the past. And my parents have said, no, what are you doing? And then it ends up that they're right. I think that kind of was I could see, the parent, Peter does come out of it and they're happy and whatever, it's okay. But her dad did know it's trouble, and just kind of reminded me of some instances in my life, And
I think Francis always was telling Kate, you can come home anytime, you can come home. But at the end, Peter was finally his son, and, he finally that was his acceptance of Peter. I think they say that at the end, there's this more of an acceptance of him in the end. So, yeah, I thought.
Well, why do you think that we don't hear anything about Anne after she babysits that one day?
because she goes back to Sarasota and
Saratoga.
Toga.
Saratoga, not Florida. Yeah. Yeah. Hey, that reminds me something about her, that she was a high functioning, she could go to work, run a nursing station. She was like the boss, and not ever see, no one ever saw that mental illness. It was just at home that they saw that. That was, I thought, really interesting, that work is her savior. She can go in, work, and everything else is okay. What'd you think about that?
Are you talking about at the end,
think
Janine,
it was-
or in the beginning?
In the beginning, the whole time. I mean, when
Okay.
she was working at the end, she was always very committed to her work. And you never, usually if you have some sort of mental illness, it'll show up at your job. I mean,
Yeah, I think so.
yeah, but it never did. She was able to go to work and function. And yeah, so that was, I thought, very interesting.
Well, the thing that struck me about that, and it's getting nitpicky, I think, but when she was able to go back to work in that capacity, and maybe it wasn't as high level as I thought, but she had not worked in nursing for how many years, and then got right back into the field again. And I
think she was just a caregiver when she went back. I mean, I thought
Yeah.
she said, this is way below me, but it's
okay.
not.
Yeah, she was just like an aide in a elderly care facility rather than the head nurse on a floor. So
Okay.
she had gone down and she wasn't getting the pay, and she couldn't afford a TV, and I mean she was
It's a scary thought on many
Scraping
levels,
by.
that a person that's charged with having direct contact with the elderly doesn't get paid enough to afford a TV, and that they've previously suffered or are continuing to suffer from mental illness. I mean, that's a very sobering, scary thought.
True.
True, really.
And I think it's true. I did a
It's true too.
Oh, 100%.
when I recovered from my knee surgery a couple years ago, I chose to go to a rehab facility, and there were people that I interacted with on a regular basis that were, I mean, I can see, I didn't have a problem with that at all, that she would have been there.
yeah.
I mean, they were kind and some of them were kind and considerate. Grateful. I was grateful for any help I was getting from anybody, but some of them I just I was like, oh, it's her turn or it's his turn. I'm kind of like, I hope the shift moves along quickly here,
Yeah.
So wouldn't it have been scary that she, as a head nurse, would have had access to all kinds of drugs?
Yeah.
And I think about being the coworker to her. What if you were a nurse that were working under her? I don't know that she could have hidden her mental illness. It was just where her position was at work that it protected her a little bit.
Yeah. I have another friend, and her sister was suffering from Alzheimer's, but she was still she was an accountant, and she had the early stages of Alzheimer's, but she was going in doing her accounting work, which is numbers and all that, and it never showed at work, but at home it started to deteriorate at home. And so I think there's this work, you have two, it's the same kind of thing with Anne. She was able to be so high functioning and then at home be a mess. Yeah, I don't know. Another story there. Okay, any final thought? Hey, I had all these questions to pull up and I didn't even need to pull them up. We really touched on, I'll just share my screen to show you how we've touched on all of them. You want to just let me share my screen again?
Oh, sorry. So we did so much tossing around of the.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was a provocative book for sure. There was a lot to talk
A lot to
about.
talk about.
Yeah.
Book club, yes.
And I was like, oh my gosh, did I pick this book? Why don't I have like a happy book club, like just read happy stories? Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah.
So here are the questions that the publisher has put together. And I think we really, the idea of inherited traits and characteristics appear frequently. We kind of talked about from generation to generation. And trauma they inherited from their parents. We've talked about that. We talked about the 4 parts, the title, and this novel is specific to 2 families. Yes, it's universal. So, which is true because we were talking that it's the stationery shop too, so that we see that it is a universal work that touches could touch many cultures. And because I thought, oh gosh, it's the Irish Catholic drink alcoholism, because that's kind of what you think, but it's a stereotype. But really, no. And this book wasn't about stereotypes, which I was afraid it was going to be. I think it wasn't just that. So any final thoughts on the book before we talk a little bit about what's coming up?
I liked it.
Well,
It's not one I would have
read
picked
it.
off the shelf.
Yeah, me neither. No, I would
No.
not. No.
No, I would not have picked this. I would not have, you know what? Because of the cover too. I agree. And the cover just does not draw one in compared to the Dutch House cover or some of these other covers. It wouldn't be a book that I was choose. So I'm glad we read it because it really is very interesting on character study.
I agree, Marcia.
Yeah. Yeah. And she's a great, her words and how she talked about memory and just her words. She's a great author. And you said 5 under 35. Who said that?
It's on the jacket. She's if you look at the author, I think she's one of the 5 under 35.
For the National Book Foundation.
Yeah.
And she lives in Pearl River, New York with her husband and their 2 sons. And her other book is Fever and The Walking People. Anyone read any of her other books?
Mm-mm.
No.
Fever is evidently about Typhoid Mary.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
In one review I read, they asked her about how she researched, how that was historical research as opposed to how did she do this one that wasn't historical research. There's all kinds of reviews out there.
And it's interesting, when she was researching this book, she would go out to breakfast at a diner with policemen. So she would get the lingo correct. So they would always meet at diners. And she said she would have called it instead of a shield, she would say badge. And it's real important that you never say badge, it's a shield. And different things that then, after reading the reviews, you pick up on different things that she did from the research that she did. So that would have been fun research, going out to breakfast with some police. Glad she didn't go to a bar. I just cringed when he opened that beer at that shooting. Didn't you just cringe? In the beginning.
Yeah.
This is not going to be a good story, because that was in the beginning. I went, oh no.
Yeah. Are you talking about after George had warned him about the?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'm talking
No,
about
okay.
Brian opening up a beer.
Oh, Brian.
First,
Okay,
at
got
that
it.
killing, at the murder, and Francis went to work, and Francis became a captain, or was on his way up, and Brian was on his way down. He ended up
Yeah.
being a traffic cop at the end because of his choices. So, well, let's talk a little bit about our next book, Know My Name by Chanel Miller. That's the title. And someone's read it, right?
Well, I did start it, Janine, but I did not finish it.
Okay.
So that will
I
be our
started-
next.
I stopped reading it because I had to read this book, so.
Okay,
yeah.
so
I stopped reading it because it's really hard.
It's really hard.
all right, so
Yeah.
oh, no.
You think this one wasn't upbeat, wait till you get to that one.
Yeah,
Okay, and the
exactly.
other one is this next one's a memoir, and yeah, it's too bad. Can't we do happy books? But so this one has had a lot of publicity recently, and because of that, every book is out right now in our system. I went to Amazon to purchase a few for our library, and Amazon was all out. So I ended up with Barnes and Noble. So I have gotten a couple that we'll just share at Egg Harbor. And if we, at our next meeting, which is November 9th, if we haven't read it, but it's a memoir, so it's not like, yes, it'll be great if you've read it, but we'll be talking about Chanel Miller, her situation in that story. So
November 9th is when we meet again?
19th,
19th. Okay.
because of Thanksgiving.
Okay, all right.
So,
did we switch the books around, or did I not?
yeah, because we were having a hard time getting Know My Name,
Okay.
and we're
I
still
thought
having
it's
a hard time, but we at
attention.
least have enough books for people to check out.
Okay. I guess I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah. Well, ladies,
Okay.
I have to go to work, so I will say have a great day, and it was a
Okay.
great discussion. Thank you, Janine,
Okay.
and I will talk to you later.
All right.
Bye, Marsha.
So, so Know My Name will still do the book, but again, it's there's going to be a chance that it's going to be hard to get you a copy. But I will have copies for us, just not a lot. Like, I think I had 12 copies of this book. This is easy to get, but Know My Name has been difficult. And we didn't know that when we picked it. It was before she interviewed on, I don't know, Good Morning America or something. So yeah, hard book, and we'll see. Do you still have your copy, Trissa, that you're reading?
Yeah, I'm trying.
Okay, well, return it. Make sure you return it to Egg Harbor when you.
I will. I'll return it to you.
Because then I'll be able to move it to the next person.
Okay.
But just understand, there's a chance if you don't get a copy, we can still talk about the book. Just like today, Sharon didn't read Ask Again Yes, and she might read it, might not. You don't always have to read the books, to enjoy it. But yeah, so next book, Know My Name, and then after that, Tender Land. This Tender Land, which we will not have trouble getting that book. So if you need a book, I have some of those on the shelf too for you. So that's the Krieger book. So that should be good too. But any questions, final thoughts?
Well, just Janine, thank you for sending out questions, because for me, they always help me remember the book and remember the interaction. So I usually will make my own questions up or find my own questions, but this was very helpful.
Okay, you'll get them again. Yeah, and it helps me too. So I always like to pull up questions and look at them. And I had all intentions of getting up early and reading a bunch of reviews, and I didn't. So thank you, Trissa, today for reading the reviews, because you know what I'm going to do as soon as we get off? Look at the reviews.
A bunch out there. Thank you all very much. Have a good month. Take care. Be safe.
Take care. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, thank you.
Great job.
Bye.
Bye-bye.